This is the New York Sports Machine on WICR.
And Mike Damergis here, along with the great Anthony Carlo on the New York Sports Machine. And the Jets making some moves, but are they the right moves? That's the question here. And we'll talk about that a little bit on the New York Sports Machine in this segment. So all the talk the whole time was Dan Quinn.
Yep.
And who they end up with?
Todd Bowles.
Now, I want to know what happened. Everybody's saying Dan Quinn's the man. I guess I don't blame Woody Johnson that he didn't want to wait, because we know Seattle's going to the Super Bowl. We know Seattle's going to win the Super Bowl. And probably the Seahawks have the best defense since what the Ravens had in 2000, maybe the Bucs 2002. Of course, they always talk about the 85 Bears, which I saw. You did not.
I did not.
And they pretty much beat everybody into submission. In an era of offense and quarterbacks and wide receivers, the Seahawks have something special. They run the ball, it's old school, and they play defense. So Dan Quinn, the hot commodity with the Jets, opting out, going with Todd Bowles, who's not a bad pick. And the more I read about him and the endorsements that he gets, especially from a guy like, Bill Parcells, who had him brought him around in Dallas. He was first introduced to him by Al Groh in 2000 with the Jets, and then he brought him over to Miami when Parcells was supervising the Dolphins situation. And Bowles did a lot of great things in Arizona. So maybe this is a good pick, and maybe it certainly brings a sense of easiness to Jet fans, knowing they don't have to wait till the end of the Super Bowl to decide. Maybe, Quinn might pull a Belichick and say, yeah, you know what, I'm not coming.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, Bowles is a great choice. I mean, if you look at his numbers, what he did with the Cardinals defense in 2013, I mean, they were 6th ranked defense overall and number 1 ranked run defense. And one thing we know that the Jets do well is, or at least better than their offense, is play defense. And that is where the one concern may be out of this whole thing. Do you go with an offensive-minded coach because you realize that your offense is terrible, and I think they were 22nd or something like that in their total offense last year, or do you stick along the lines of a defensive coach just like Rex was? I mean, that poses an interesting question there. Now, I think Todd Bowles is significant of the fact that Woody Johnson wants to change the environment around the New York Jets.
Well, he needed to, because, look, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I have to. It was an Animal House atmosphere the first couple of years.
Yeah.
And look what happened. 4 years of not making the playoffs, a lack of discipline. And quite honestly, I don't know what the Bills were thinking. They pummeled the Jets this year. A week when they had that tremendous snowstorm in Buffalo, Doug Marrone, the team doesn't practice. They go to Detroit, the Jets practice all week, and they blew them out. Yeah. Who's a better coach? Doug Marrone, not Rex Ryan. And there were games this year where the Jets weren't prepared. Who's that fall on?
Yeah.
Falls on the fat guy.
Well, listen, I mean, Rex Ryan, there was an issue with him being too soft on the players. And I think that with Todd Bowles, you're not going to only get a coach that the players like and is a player's coach, but you're going to get a coach who's going to show them tough love. And I think that's what this team may need, especially after, what Ryan had done with this team. Now, Ryan goes over to the Bills, and as you said, he's promising this team in the press conference, hey, post it on the bulletin board. We're going to outwork you. We're going to have a better work ethic. We're going to be playing games in January. The guy's got a lot of confidence. He's got something that wins you over, and that's what he did with the Jets. He comes off with that big ego, that strong belief that he's going to lead a team to success, and I think they chose the quiet guy. Todd Bowles is going to be a not as big of an ego. He's the quiet leader, but I think he's going to get the job done. I think he has the tools to continue this defense, and from what I hear, about him being a disciplinary as well as a player's coach, he's somebody that's really going to, I think, shake things up for the Jets and really, take a different approach and be a good leader for this team.
Look, they brought in Charlie Casserly, they brought in Wolf, and these are football guys, lifelong football guys, and, they presented him Todd Bowles. And again, Todd Bowles gets a Bill Parcells stamp of approval. That means an awful lot.
It does.
And, it's not some firm. I mean, I wonder who this firm is that picked John Idzik, this pencil-pushing geek, who pretty much destroyed the Jets. I mean, Woody Johnson should get his money back for this whole disaster over John Itzik the last 2 years. So Todd Bowles comes over, kind of like the quiet leader of the Jets, and also an African-American coach. First time for they had Herm Edwards back in 2001, so it's the second time now the Jets had an African-American head coach, and he kind of came out of nowhere. And this wasn't a token interview like they have the Rooney Rule where they have to want you to interview an African-American coach. This was the guy they wanted, and I like that. There wasn't anything fake about it.
No,
there were no smoke screens going on, and he brings that defense. And Antonio Cromartie came out and said, the defense that he runs is similar to what Rex is, which is good for the players. They don't have to get adjusted to a whole new defense. And you talk about continuing the defense. You don't need to have an offensive coach to have a good offense. Case in point. In 1998, Brian Billick was head coach of the Vikings. They scored an incredible number of points under Randall Cunningham, 15-1 in that year. They should have went to the Super Bowl. They lost to the Falcons in the championship on a missed field goal. He goes to the Ravens, and the Ravens struggle on offense for over a decade until they get Joe Flacco, and they were a defensive team. Another guy, Mike Ditka, tight end. He's with the Bears, and what are they? They're a defense coach. They're a defensive team that runs the ball. So just because you have a defensive coach doesn't mean you can't have an offensive team. So let's knock that myth right out of there.
All right, so let's get rid of that. But what's going to be important here is that, and he's already lining up his coaching staff. I mean, he may have Cardinals linebacker coach Caldwell come over. Chan Gailey, former Dallas coach, will maybe the offensive coordinator.
I am not crazy about that.
You're not crazy about that?
Chan Gailey, been out of football a couple of years. When you're out of something for a little while, you seem to lose touch. But he does have experience as a head coach. Moderate success at best, but a lot of years as a coordinator. And Bill Cowler gave him his stamp of approval for Chan Gailey. So that does say a lot. But Chan Gailey is 63 years old.
Yeah. Well, I mean. Yeah, what are you, ageist here, Mike? Is that what I'm getting here?
I'm not an ageist. I like that word. I like
ageist.
An ageist. I'm not. But you know what? I think players need to be connected to somebody.
Who's youthful?
Because you're talking 40 years difference between the coach and the players. I think that's
look at
a
Tom
lot.
Coughlin.
Tom Coughlin struggled originally. He didn't relate to the players until they bought into the system. But in this, Bowles, young first-time coach in his 40s. Maybe needs somebody to guide him away. Maybe Chan Gailey might be the right move, but there's nothing, how do I put it, spectacular or stellar about Chan Gailey. And I hope I'm wrong.
Well,
because there's a lot of fixing that needs to be done.
No, there is, and I think that the Jets, the first move, and of course we have to mention Mike McCagnon came over as the general manager. The choice to bring over Bowles came a couple of hours after McCagnon was chosen for that general manager position, and McCagnon was excited to meet Bowles. He took he drove with the driver to the airport to meet Bowles off the plane, and they spent a couple of hours, getting acquainted with each other because they had never worked together. And I think that what I see so far is a team they're building, a coaching team, a coaching staff that really, and a front office that is really going to be determined to get this away from debacle and back to success.
McCagnon comes over from the Texans. He's brought over there years ago by Charlie Casserly again, and then Casserly, of course, who was part of the Redskins organization. So Casserly has his fingerprints really all over this franchise, and it's good that McCagnon was in on the interview process with his head coach. And everybody warned Woody a couple of years ago that if you're going to hire a new GM, you got to get rid of the coach. You can't stuff a new GM with a coach. And it turned out to be a wasted 2 years. It was literally a wasted 2 years. And I've been watching garbage football from the New York Jets. Garbage football since a loss to the Giants in that game where Victor Cruz ran 99 yards for the touchdown. I've seen garbage football since then.
Well, I mean, now we're moving in the right direction. So let's let go of the baggage and maybe let's visit how this team can attempt to improve for this upcoming season. There are going to be some guys that this team is going to look to hold on to. One of those guys, maybe linebacker David Harris, who's going to be up for free agency. It would be maybe a good idea for them to hold on to him.
Wait a minute. Is this our yay or nay segment?
Yeah, we're moving on yay or nay.
Oh, well, you got to introduce it, the yay or nay segment.
Okay, fine. Let's go into yay or nay. So here we have a list of guys that may or may not be able to help the New York Jets. So let's begin with guys that they already have on this team. I mentioned Harris. We'll move on to Willie Colon and then Michael Vick, and we'll see what Mike thinks about these two players. These are now upcoming free agents.
Okay.
So do the Jets hold on to Willie Colon, or do they let him walk? Willie Colon, he's played 8 seasons already in the NFL. He's been an anchor on this team. He's getting older. Yay or nay?
Yay.
Okay. How about Michael Vick, starting over with the quarterback position, maybe something that's going to be a hot topic?
Nay.
Michael Vick is
And
gone.
let me explain nay. Michael Vick, who got paid $4 million a year, was completely unprepared to be the quarterback of the Jets. Meanwhile, Cardell Jones, who's a third-string quarterback for Ohio State, saves the season and gives him a national championship because he was prepared. A student, a kid was prepared. Michael Vick, a professional, not prepared. Nay.
Okay, so that's a nay. Now, let's stick with this quarterback position since we hit Michael Vick. Now, as we know, the 2015 NFL Draft is coming up, and as we know, Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston will be in that 1-2 spot, in the draft interchangeably. The Jets, it would be on a wing and a prayer that the Titans or the Buccaneers would pass up on Mariota and Winston. I don't think it's happening. Just talking to Jersey Joe Archino before this about whether or not the Jacksonville Jaguars or the
Tennessee Titans.
Tennessee Titans would go for him. Now, the Jaguars they're already set with Blake Bortles. The Raiders.
I don't know if to say they're set with Blake Bortles. I don't know about that. If Mariota's available,
Yeah, but do you really think they draft the QB 2 years in a row?
player like Mariota comes along how many times in a lifetime?
I mean, that's true, but I mean,
You can always trade Blake Bortles. I'm sure they're going to have a lot of takers out there, a lot of teams, namely the New York Jets, namely the Buffalo Bills, or maybe even the Chicago Bears, do need a quarterback.
right, and then you got the Raiders in that who's going to have a shot at that, but they already got Carr and young quarterback.
I think they're set with Carr.
All right, so if there is a godsend somehow for the New York Jets and those teams, let's say let it be the Titans, the Jaguars, and maybe the Bucks pass somehow they pass or they choose somebody else, who would you take, Jameis Winston or Marcus Mariota if you're the New York Jets?
Jameis Winston. Nay, I don't want his baggage. I don't want his trouble.
That's interesting. That is interesting.
I forget it. I'll pass on him. A lot of reasons I could go into. Is he another Cam Newton? Maybe. I mean, Cam's had led his team to the playoffs, but I don't think Cam's lived up to the hype that everybody thought he would be. And I don't want the problems with Winston. Please, I don't need more Jets getting arrested. They've already had 2 arrests since the end of the season.
But he could be the savior, Mike, based on his NFL. All right, we'll move off of him. So some other free agent names coming up this year. Now, this guy is not a free agent yet because he's still a member of the Chicago Bears. But if Jay Cutler was released by the Bears and everything was, taken care of in his career in Chicago, no.
Nay.
Now,
Because
well, listen to me, Mike.
What?
This team has been struggling with Geno Smith. I swear to you, I would take a homeless person off the street and put them in the quarterback, and you're here turning down Jameis Winston, Jay Cutler. I mean, who the hell are you on?
First off, Jay Cutler, how much of that contract am I going to have to swallow?
A lot of it, probably.
Okay, forget it
A
right
good
there.
chunk
I'm not wasting my $40 million I could put towards other players. Secondly, Jay Cutler is a reincarnation of Jeff George. Big arm, horrible footwork, and got chicken noodle soup in his brain. He really doesn't get the concept of playing on a team, and he really has trouble reading defenses clearly. So, nay on Jay Cutler.
Can I just ask you a question then?
I thought we're playing yay or nay. I don't want any questions.
We are, but I need to ask you a question. Where is this franchise going with a quarterback? Because are we sticking with Geno Smith, who you avidly said needs to be gotten rid of last year? Because if you're getting rid of Michael Vick, that leaves us with Sims, the third stringer, being our quarterback if Geno's not the guy. So that's why Jay Cutler to me.
It's a good. I might have to have Kyle Orton come out of retirement. Phil Sims. Come on out. Come out of the broadcast booth, Phil Sims. He's competitive.
Oh, man. All right. Anyway, what about a Brian Hoyer? He's a free agent. Browns didn't do too badly.
Yeah, I think that would be good. The Jets could run the ball. They got the defense.
Game manager, maybe?
Game
Brian
manager.
Hoyer?
Yeah, they need someone that's not going to destroy him with turnovers.
Yeah, okay.
That's what they need.
All right, so now we have some free agent wide receivers coming up. Now, a lot of these guys are going to probably stick with the teams that they're already on. Some of those guys, Damergis Thomas, Julius Thomas, two from Broncos.
And some guys can get franchised too. So
yeah, those are two of their Broncos studs. Now, whether Peyton Manning stays or goes may depend on whether Damergis or Julius want to leave. But if they had shots at them, obviously I'm not expecting to hear a horn on Julius Thomas or Damergis Thomas. I don't see why you would horn them.
I can't horn them. Anything's an improvement over what they have now. So yes
right.
to both.
Now, C.J. Spiller, he will be a free agent. The Bills, I assume, again, are going to sign C.J. Spiller and maybe try and do something to continue to hold on to him. But whether you yay or nay him, I don't know.
Well, all things considered, you don't know if they're going to take it. Other positions at wide receiver, whatnot.
I think
how much money. I think you consider him. Yes.
I think you need another wide receiver. I think that's a must. If you're a New York Jet, you need the guy. Eric Decker is not the guy.
No.
Okay? Now, Jeremy Curley is not the guy. Okay? Jay Samaro is not the guy.
All right, go back to
Percy Harvin is also not the guy.
He ain't coming back.
They need that number one type receiver. How about Jeremy Maclin? He had a big year for the Eagles. Again, may get signed again before he hits free agency.
Yes, absolutely consider.
But you consider him. How about, let's see. Larry Fitzgerald. He is an older player.
To me, he would be at the top of my list. Older player, hard worker, leader. That's the key word, leader. Absolutely on Larry Fitzgerald. He's one of those guys that I think he's in such incredible condition, is so mentally prepared all the time. I think this guy could play into his late 30s.
All right, and how about Randall Cobb, another most likely to stay with the Packers based on Aaron Rodgers and the way those two hook up?
You consider him, but he's not going anywhere. I mean, you got a quarterback. What are you going to do? You're going to go from a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers to he doesn't know who can get him the ball at this point.
Exactly.
So you're not going to leave.
So realistically now, moving off of all those free agents, most of which will probably stay with the teams that they've already been successful with. And now we look at the draft. Now the Jets, aside from Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota, are in a spot at the number 6 pick to take on somebody like maybe a Devontae Parker, who in the draft was a good wide receiver out of the college football this year. Can they turn him into maybe an Odell Beckham Jr. like the Giants have hit gold with Odell Beckham?
You don't know, and what's going to determine where he goes in the draft, obviously you got to find out who you're going to sign to. So if you get receivers ahead of the draft, you could start looking towards cornerbacks.
Yeah.
You could maybe start look to building the offensive line because it's starting to get a little old under Mangold and Ferguson now. So you're going to have to start to look to build the offensive line. So it's kind of premature right now to see who they would take. I mean, obviously you want to see who they're going to take, what I'm saying, but you don't know how they're going to build a lot of wide receivers, there in the free agency class. What cornerbacks are available, what defensive backs are going to be available. So it depends who they get in free agency is the way to go.
So the best possible case, the Jets maybe can come up with a draft pick like a Devontae Parker and try and bolster that offense with another receiver. Their running game needs to improve because they do have two talented running backs in Chris Ivory and Chris Johnson. They just
Chris Johnson is done. He's finished. First off,
Chris Ivory I think is a good running back.
He's good. He's definitely a good running back. Cardell Jones, say he decides he's going to enter the draft.
If he decides.
Yeah, if he decides. I will give him a yay if he's available at number 6. I think the Jets should take him because there is minimal alternatives right now for the Jets at quarterback. You cannot go another season. Woody Johnson. You cannot go another season with Geno Smith. I cannot take going to these games and it being over by halftime. Enough.
Well, now you mentioned Cardell Jones, but he will be the guy if he returns to Ohio State. He'll be the guy for that team.
Well, there's no guarantee about that too. I mean, there's no guarantee he's going to get that starting position.
No.
It's not going to be handed to him. If I'm him, show me the money.
Yeah.
Show me the money. Take the money.
You know what?
And go to the NFL.
Look, what it comes down to is John Idzik had a lot of room to work with getting players. The only player he got was Percy Harvin after the season was half in the tube. So what this team needs to do, in my opinion, is go out, try and get a receiver, whether it be through the draft or maybe they're lucky enough to have one of these wide receivers out in free agency, one of these big names not return to their successful team. get somebody who can be a solid number one for you. That way, Decker can build off of that. You have that number one guy. You have that 1-2 punch. Have some hope in Chris Ivory to have a big running year and try and figure out, whether it be through free agency or somehow a miracle in the draft, how to build at that quarterback position. Those are your three main concerns to me. Don't touch the defense. I know you said cornerbacks, but to me, the secondary, yeah, it's bad. To me, this team needs more help on the offensive end. If you weighed both ends of it.
Wait. I got to be honest with you. If push comes to shove, and if the defensive back or the cornerback's available to be either free agency, trade, draft, and the cornerback's better than the wide receiver, I'm taking the cornerback. Because I can't.
If he's better,
I can't take any more of watching guys getting burnt in the Jets secondary.
No.
I can't stomach this anymore.
I'm not telling you to. I'm not saying to go out there and settle for another wide receiver. I told you a number one. If they had come across, whether it be an older wide receiver in free agency,
okay, all things equal, wide receiver, cornerback, I take the receiver. But if the cornerback's better,
because. All right.
I'm taking the cornerback.
Because 22nd and 25th overall in offense in the last 2 years, I mean, you need something or someone.
Well, who the quarterbacks have been?
Well, yeah, but
who the quarterbacks been for the last 4 years?
I agree. Quarterback and wide receiver, you need to make a change there. And whether that be, third stringer Sims, the son of Phil Sims, or, whether it be somebody,
I would like to see him get some more playing time this year. They had nothing to lose.
I don't think it would be the worst case scenario to sign a Jay Cutler or a Brian Hoyer and try and make something out of them at the quarterback position if, of course, they're not lucky enough to run into a Jameis Winston or Mariota, but that's very unlikely. I don't know. I think at the 6th pick in the draft, it's going to be highly unlikely that all those teams pass up on Mariota and Jameis Winston.
All right, well, as we move closer to the draft, we'll have a little more analysis. We'll know where Cardell Jones is going, and you will have a better idea of things.
Anyway, for this edition of New York Sports Machine here, Mike Damergis, Anthony Carlo. We'll see you next time.